Hello everyone. Thank you for watching. You keep these eerie stories alive. But here's the thing, only 10% of viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy our content, hitting subscribe and like helps us more than you know. It takes a second, but it makes a huge difference. And don't forget to share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks again. You made this possible. See you in the next one, if you dare. At Mercy General Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, there is an older section of the building that most staff don't use unless they have to. The main patient units have been remodeled, but on the third floor near the old administration wing there's a bathroom that was never updated. It sits down in a short hallway that connects file storage rooms, a small supply closet, and a couple of old break spaces. Patients aren't housed there anymore. The area is mostly quiet, and the bathroom is used only when someone is floating between units and needs a quick stop. It was a Friday afternoon when I ended up there. I had picked up an extra float shift. That meant moving between medical, surgical, and telemetry, depending on where they needed help. The day wasn't calm, but it wasn't hectic either. I was running between rooms, pushing meds, helping with vitals, and responding to call lights. I had just finished crushing a potassium tablet and mixing it for a patient who struggled with pills. My hands were sticky, and I needed to wash up before grabbing the next medication cart. The main break room sink was busy, so I walked down the hallway toward that old bathroom. The hall was quiet. The tile looked pale and worn, and the auto light above the door flickered as it came on with its usual buzzing sound. I pushed the door open and went inside. The bathroom looked its age. The mirror above the sink had silver edges where the backing had worn away. The fluorescent light above gave off a cold, flat glow. It was clinical, not comfortable. I turned the faucet, leaned forward, and began scrubbing my hands. Halfway through rinsing, I caught something in the mirror. A woman was standing behind me. She wore plain blue scrubs, not the newer sets with the hospital logo or contrast colors. These were the older kind, drawstring waist tied high. Her sleeves were pushed slightly past her wrists like she had just come from a cold floor. Her hair was dark, pulled back into a bun low at the neck. There was no badge, no cap, nothing that identified her. Her arms were relaxed at her sides. She wasn't looking directly at me in the mirror. Her eyes were slightly downcast, as if she was waiting for me to step aside. It didn't hit me right away. My mind filled in the gaps the way it always does in hospitals. I thought it was another float nurse. Maybe someone cutting through to grab paper towels or check her pager. That's how normal it seemed in the first second. But when I turned around, the bathroom was empty. There were no footsteps, no sound of the door opening or closing, just silence and the steady hum of the vent. I stood still for a moment. My chest wasn't pounding. I wasn't panicked. I was confused. The way you feel when you're missing a simple piece of information on a patient's chart. I walked to the stalls and pushed the doors open. I crouched slightly to look at the floor beneath them. Nothing. I even glanced behind the small janitor's cart parked in the corner. Empty. When I looked back at the mirror, she was gone. I left quickly. I didn't tell my charge nurse, and I didn't bring it up in the shift report. I definitely didn't mention it at home. Nurses notice things. We are trained to observe, but we are also trained to compartmentalize. I told myself it could have been a trick of the light, a shadow, or just stress catching up with me, but it hadn't felt like a trick. Months went by before I floated to that unit again. It was another slower day, and I ended up in the staff break room near the old hallway. I was sitting with a clipboard, eating pretzels while finishing charting. One of the older nurses, Janet, who had worked at Mercy for over 30 years, sat down across from me. We started talking about the hospital's layout. She mentioned how the building had been remodeled so many times that the old emergency department used to be where central supply is now. She pointed toward the hallway where the bathroom was and said, "That used to be our main nurse station back in the day. The staff bathroom down there hasn't been used much for years." I asked her why. Janet gave me a calm look, like she was weighing whether or not to continue. Finally, she said, "In 1997, a nurse collapsed in that bathroom. Cardiac arrest. She was on her break, washing her hands, when it happened. Nobody found her for at least 15 minutes. She was only 29 years old." She paused, then added, Some of us say we still see her there, usually not directly, just in the mirror. She said it plainly. No dramatic tone, no exaggeration. Just another fact mixed in with all the other experiences she carried. Code blues, patient deaths, family grief. She didn't act like it was a ghost story. It was just something that had happened. I didn't tell her about what I saw. I didn't want to admit it, but her words stuck. Over the years, I worked that floor many more times. I avoided the old bathroom when I could, not because I was terrified, but because I remembered what I saw in the mirror. A nurse in blue scrubs, quiet, waiting, present. I still think about that reflection. It wasn't threatening. She didn't move toward me. She didn't speak. She didn't even look me directly in the eyes. She was just there. Nurses carry things with them long after a shift ends. We remember the rooms by the patients who didn't survive. We hear the echo of IV alarms after they've been shut off. We remember the last words, the last glances, the final breaths. And maybe what I saw in that mirror was part of that. Maybe that nurse isn't haunting the hospital. Maybe she's still on shift. St. Mary's Hospice Unit in Cleveland, Ohio, was quiet on Monday morning. The overhead lights were dim from the night shift, and the rhythm of IV pumps mixed with the occasional cough or squeak of shoes on the polished floor. It was the kind of stillness you get used to when working in hospice care. I was covering 6 patients that morning. Room 407 was near the end of the hallway, close to the supply room. The patient there was Mr. William Carter. He was 82 years old, a retired railroad worker, widowed for nearly 10 years. He had 3 adult children. Only one daughter visited regularly. The sons lived out of state and called when they could. William had been with us for 2 weeks. His diagnosis was advanced pancreatic cancer. There were no curative options left. He was listed as DNR, do not resuscitate. He had been clear about it. 2 days earlier, when I adjusted his blankets, he had looked me in the eye and said, "No codes, no machines. Let me go when it's time." His mind was sharp and he was ready. That morning, his condition had been sliding. His heart rate was irregular, and his blood pressure was in the high 70s systolic. His oxygen sat around 86% on a nasal cannula. His breathing was shallow but regular. His skin was pale and cool at the fingertips. Nothing sudden, no emergency, just the slow decline we see all the time. At 8:42 a.m., William Carter died. It was peaceful. The nursing aide had just turned him onto his side, and I was documenting his vitals when I noticed the silence. No chest rise, no pulse, no movement. His skin was cool, his pupils fixed. I confirmed death. We covered him to the shoulders, left the small lamp on, pulled the curtain, and documented everything. Time of death, who was present, post-mortem care pending, and family notification. This was routine for us. I had done it hundreds of times. About 25 minutes later, I was in the hallway updating the attending physician by phone. Our CNA, Maria, came out of room 407. Her face was unsettled, not frightened, but uneasy. She gestured for me to come back inside. I walked in. She hadn't started full post-mortem care yet. She had only removed the oxygen tubing and was checking for dentures. William Carter was sitting up. His legs remained flat under the sheet, but his torso was upright, angled as if someone were pushing themselves awake from a nap. His head was turned slightly to the left, toward the empty visitor chair in the corner of the room. No one had sat there during the entire shift. His eyes were wide open. They were dry and glassy, the way eyes look after death. But he was staring in that direction as if focused. We froze. There was no gasping, no agonal breaths, no sudden jerks. He was upright, still dead, but alert-looking. I stepped closer. I checked for a pulse. Nothing. His chest was not rising. His pupils did not react. His skin was mottled and cool up to the wrists. Still, he held himself upright for nearly 10 seconds. Maria whispered, "Mr. Carter?" She reached toward the call light without taking her eyes off him. Then, slowly, William lowered himself back down. It wasn't a sudden collapse. There was no stiff spasm, no jerking muscle movement. He reclined like someone had guided him back. His shoulders sank into the bed, his head tilted against the pillow, his eyes still open, his arms never moved, his face didn't twitch. But the movement was deliberate, controlled. Once he was flat again, the room was silent. Maria and I stood there for nearly a minute before I leaned forward and closed his eyelids. We continued post-mortem care. There was nothing to chart about what happened. No medical term that fit. I didn't document it. 15 minutes later, the transport team came. They took William's body down to the morgue. His daughter came by the next morning to collect his belongings. A wallet, a worn leather Bible, and a small photograph of his late wife. That should have been the end of it, but it stayed with me. I have seen post-mortem twitches. I have seen residual muscle spasms in the arms and legs. I have seen sudden breaths from trapped air in the lungs. None of those looked like this. This was a man sitting upright, pausing to look at something, then laying himself back down. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about the empty chair, the way his eyes were fixed on it. We hadn't placed anyone there. His daughter had left the night before and wasn't in the room that morning. Maria admitted later that she avoided room 407 for days after. She said she could still picture him upright, staring at the corner. When new staff rotated onto the unit, we didn't tell them about it. There was no reason. But the CNAs talk, and word spreads. More than once I overheard whispers about the man in 407. One night a float nurse asked me straight out, "Is it true one of your patients sat up after death?" I just told her I didn't want to discuss it. Months passed. The room was reassigned, redecorated, and used for dozens of patients. But every time I stepped into 407, I found myself glancing at that chair in the corner. I never saw anything else unusual, but the memory was enough. Hospice work is full of things you can't explain. Families sometimes report seeing loved ones reach for people who aren't there in the hours before they pass. Patients talk to empty spaces or smile at the corners of the room. We try to explain it as medication, hypoxia, or the brain shutting down. And maybe it is. But what Maria and I saw wasn't during life. It was after. I don't pretend to know what it meant. Maybe it was some last surge of nerve signals. Maybe the muscles responded in ways I can't understand. But the way he moved, controlled, intentional, doesn't fit anything I've seen in decades of nursing. I think about William Carter's words 2 days earlier. "Let me go when it's time." He had been ready. And yet for those 10 seconds, it felt like he wasn't gone. Like he had one more thing to do, or one more person to see, sitting in that empty chair. To this day, I check the corners of the room when a patient is close to the end. I don't know what I expect to see, but I look. It was a Thursday afternoon at St. Vincent Medical Center in Dallas, Texas. The floor was busy, as usual. I was working a 12-hour shift on the step-down unit, covering my usual patients plus one of the overflow rooms. The monitors were chirping in the background. Call lights were buzzing every few minutes, and the staff moved quickly through the hallways. 3 days earlier, we had lost a patient named Daniel Harris. He was 61 years old, admitted after a carotid artery procedure. He came from the neuro for post-op observation. The vascular team had done the repair, placed a dressing across the right side of his neck, and stabilized him. The plan was simple: keep him overnight, monitor, and then discharge in the morning. But the next day after breakfast, he suffered a sudden bleed. We called a rapid response that turned into a code blue. Despite multiple attempts and a transfer to the ICU, we lost him. His time of death was documented at 10:42 a.m. I had been the nurse who packed up his belongings: a pair of eyeglasses, a phone charger, and a deck of playing cards his wife had brought him. I sealed them in a plastic bag and locked them in the nurse manager's drawer. Now it was Thursday. I was charting labs outside room 312 when Marcus, a new housekeeper, came down the hallway with his supply cart. He had only been with us for 2 weeks. He was a friendly young guy, always willing to help. He stopped at my station, looked a little uneasy, and asked, "Hey, is it normal for patients to be walking around with bandages on their neck?" I thought maybe one of my patients had gotten out of bed without assistance. Sometimes, post-biopsy or post-line patients do that. I asked which room he meant. Marcus pointed down toward the east hallway, near the elevators. I didn't catch a name, he said, but he smiled and waved at me. Older man, gray hair, kind of thin. His hospital gown was loose in the back, and he had a pretty big dressing on the side of his neck. Marcus tapped the right side of his own neck. It looked recent. My stomach sank. I asked if he had seen which room the man went into. Marcus said he turned the corner toward the staff break room and then disappeared. That wing of the floor had been empty all week. It was where we stored overflow beds when needed, but none had been in use for days. No new neuro or trauma admissions had come up in the last 48 hours. I checked with the charge nurse. She confirmed every bed on that wing was empty. I opened the electronic census and scrolled back 3 days. There it was. Harris, Daniel, age 61. Procedure: carotid artery repair. Status: deceased. Dressing on the right side of the neck. I didn't want to believe it, so I went straight to security. We keep cameras on all main junctions and exits of the unit. I asked them to pull the footage from the east hallway around the time Marcus said he saw the man. The video showed Marcus walking into frame with his cart. He paused, looked up, nodded, then smiled slightly. He gestured as if waving to someone. But there was no one in the frame with him. He looked like he was talking to empty space. Then he pushed his cart aside, as if moving out of someone's way, and walked off screen. I felt the cold crawl up my spine. This wasn't a dramatic movie scare. It was worse. It was the slow, steady kind of wrong that seeps in when something doesn't add up. Security flagged the clip and filed it under unusual activity, just like protocol requires. We didn't tell Marcus right away. He was still new, still figuring out his routine, but every nurse who has worked long enough in a hospital knows things like this happen. We've all had those moments. A call light that flashes in an empty room. A patient who insists someone was standing by their bed even though the door never opened. A voice you hear in the hallway when no one is there. Daniel Harris hadn't been a difficult patient. He was polite, soft-spoken, the kind who thanked you after every vitals check. Maybe that was why he lingered. Or maybe, sometimes, people don't leave right away. Some of the staff started saying the east hallway felt colder. I never confirmed it, but I also never argued. What I did do was move the linen cart away from that section and kept staff from going there unless absolutely necessary. Room 312, where Harris had stayed, was never reassigned. It remained locked until the next round of renovations. Even then, staff avoided it. No one wanted to be the first to step back inside. Weeks later, Marcus brought it up again on his own. We were both at the elevators. He said, "That guy I saw, he seemed nice. He smiled and waved. Didn't look confused or anything. Just walked like he belonged there." I nodded but didn't say much. Sometimes silence is easier. The truth is, Marcus wasn't the only one. Over the next few months, 2 different patients mentioned a polite man standing by their door at night. One described him with gray hair and a gown. Another pointed to the side of her neck saying he had something here. None of them ever knew Harris. They couldn't have. We never found an explanation. The video still exists in the security archives. Daniel Harris's belongings are still in the manager's drawer, unclaimed. And sometimes when I walk past the east hallway alone, I find myself glancing over my shoulder. I don't believe in making stories bigger than they are. I don't add details that weren't there. But I know what Marcus saw. I know what I saw on the screen. And I know some things don't fit into charts or shift reports. If you ask Marcus today, he'll still tell you about the thin man in the gown with the fresh dressing on his neck who waved at him in the empty hallway. And he'll tell you that man was polite.